Hello, fellow wealth hackers. We have exciting news related to the Wealth Hacker Conference coming soon. As in, the details are coming soon. The conference will be in November of 2020. We are about to sign our super amazing keynote speaker and the venue. We'll release details and early bird priced tickets soon. If you don't know, the feedback was seriously just off the hook. We received over 300 comments, emails, DMs on how it was one of the best conferences they'd ever been to. The FOMO was realized. Apologies for anyone who didn't make it. So let that be a lesson for next time. Also, if you're a sponsor out there and you want to sponsor an event, our sponsors are all in. they everyone's coming back that sponsored last year because it was a fabulous conference, and they were extremely impressed and happy with what happened at the event. So if you're interested in being part of this as well, reach out to us if you would like to sponsor our event. Even from the veterans, the feedback was amazing. Even from veterans of real estate conferences, people I've known for like 10 years, and they go to the same conferences like every one of those years. And they've been to dozens of others. I even had people coming up to me who went to conferences that they just got back from in the States, from like big names, and they said that ours was better. I don't, I'll just say, we just did what we wanted to do. We executed the vision that we wanted to, and please let this conference be a lesson to anyone out there. If you ever doubt in yourself, if you ever doubt in the David within yourself that David cannot beat Goliath, then just look at the Wealth Hacker Conference. Like, seriously, Cherry's an immigrant to Canada who speaks English as her second language. Her parents literally made all their money with their hands, hard work, and hustle to put her through school. I'm a child to immigrants, a mediocre student in school, and this was our first time event that we largely decided to do on a whim. This was our biggest investment of both time, money, and grief. Maybe it's more than both, of our lifetime. I still question why we want to do this again. Anyways, on to something else. As one of Cherry and I's goal for 2020 is to eat even healthier and cleaner. I can be a bit picky, and I want to enjoy my food more. So what we've done is we hired a personal chef. As with anything, if you don't like your reality, then change your reality. I wasn't enjoying the food that we were having at home. We were eating too many prepackaged foods from like that large big box store that you guys know I shop from. I just wasn't happy with it. The quality of the flavors. I have a lot of sensitivities as well. So we hired a personal chef to cook our meals. She once a week. She chooses only fresh ingredients and natural ingredients with quality products and cooking oils. Pretty much poor quality anything causes trouble for my stomach, especially vegetable oils. She's also using a lot of my own cookware, so we personally don't use anything that's non-stick. So we're happy about that. Needless to say, I've had two of the best lunches I've ever had, and had many great dinners, and now breakfasts. We eat the same food for breakfast as well. We're not that picky, and also we're looking for quality of what's going into our bodies over having to stay with traditional breakfast foods, for example. The food is lasts us a week. We still eat out from time to time as part of our regular schedule. Life, we enjoy variety, like no different than anyone else. This has been well worth the added investment. As an added bonus, Chef Roxy who is our personal chef. She is a Red Seal trained chef who is a dynamic shopper as well. So she gets our groceries cheaper than I can get them because she's willing to do all the price matching. We pay her an hourly rate. The first week took Roxy about 4.5 hours between cooking and shopping. This week took a little bit more. She also cleans up the kitchen after herself. So what she accomplished in those 4.5 hours would have taken me probably 9 hours, and the kitchen would still be a mess. And more importantly, I'd lose a day. I know friends who do meal prep once a week, where they do all the prepping and they cook everything, and then they put it into containers, and that's what they eat for the whole week. So I have friends that do that like all Sundays, and I kind of miss them because now I no longer see them at social events. So that's not something that I wanted for myself. So I've posted pictures and videos on my Instagram, so I do not recommend you look at them if you're on an empty stomach. So you've been warned. On to this week's show. Oh, my Instagram, in case anyone doesn't know, is just my name, Erwin Cito. You can find me easily on Instagram or on Facebook. Anyways, on to this week's guest. He's an old friend from REIN. His name is Ming Lim. He's a real estate developer. He's an investor in Waterloo and Toronto. He's a realtor. He's a really smart guy who just left his full-time job to become a full-time in real estate. I know a lot of you out there are looking for a path out of your full-time job, and Ming is here to share how he is going upon his own journey and how he's able to cash flow investment properties in Toronto. Ming and his friends are also hosting a conference that's coming up really soon, as in like February 1st, 2020, really soon. He's here to share about that as well. Details are in the show notes, so go check them out. The website is www.volitionprop.com/quickstart. That's Volition, VOLITION, prop.com/quickstart. And the name of Quickstart is just by coincidence. All right, on to this week's show, and I'm so happy to give you Ming Lim. Hi, Ming. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Aaron?
I'm excellent. I hear you have a whole lot of free time lately.
Whole lot, no, but that's the belief, right?
That is the belief.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you so for probably the listeners' context, what did you do, Lim? Just in the last 30 days, was it?
Yeah, I guess it's within 30 days.
What did you do? What did you do, Ming?
I left my full-time job.
You left your full-time job, and you're very well educated, so that job probably paid you quite well.
I don't know where you got this rumor about my education, but you went to Waterloo too, didn't you?
Or no, I went to Western, another one of those W universities.
Yeah.
I worked in tech for IBM for 7 years. What were you up to? What did you quit?
So I was at Capital One. Fantastic company. Like I actually really love working there. And I was doing outsourcing management. Mm-hmm. If you look back at my official resume, it's kind of been all over the place. Mm-hmm. Part of what I learned, actually, it wasn't about the work. And I think everybody kind of goes through this, but it ends up being what you get out of the work. Mm-hmm. And for me, I learned, probably a little later than others, that it was the people that really mattered. And so once I landed a job where I was working with a good team, I had a good time. So,
hey, well, with work, you spend most of your time with them versus your own family. So it better be a good group of people.
It's shocking, actually. Like now that I've left, this is a bit of a mourning period, not seeing these people every day. People that become very close friends to me, and hanging out with my kid a lot more. Kind of helping raise her. That's been fun, but I have a new respect for stay-at-home parents.
So, how far did you commute to work? Can you share what was your official job title?
I was a relationship manager, which basically is banks don't do a lot of stuff themselves. They spend a lot of time outsourcing their work. Mm-hmm. So they rely on third parties to do that work for them, and I was that liaison between the third parties that were doing the work and the company. So contracting, sourcing, all that kind of stuff. Very different from real estate investing.
So I'll make one more poke at your old former work before we move on. Is Cherry deliberately? We have a Capital One credit card because we're Costco members. So anyone who's a Costco member here all knows.
Yep.
She deliberately kept our limit low because she wanted to control our spending. But then
that's not a bad
idea. Thing. But the thing is, when we had our own conference, your expenses go through the roof.
Oh my God. You put that all on your Capital One credit card?
No. I had to give up one of my other credit cards that I was using for personal to the business. Yeah. And so now Cherry and I are now consolidated under one personal credit card with a small limit.
Yeah.
And then when she called Capital One to increase the limit, they asked for the moon. They wanted like everything on all of our corporations and okay.
That sounds like my former employer, all right.
Because I'm used to, because I have a relationship with my bank. Usually I just walk in and you get whatever you want. because they know
Yeah.
what you got,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. It's definitely different for like a credit card company because they don't like one that just does credit cards because they don't have that history. They don't know what
Yeah,
your, you know,
right,
like what your assets are and stuff like that.
right. Yeah,
And
because
they
my
do a
bank has all
fantastic
my
job.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And they do a fantastic job of mitigating their credit risk. Yeah, so they do it. You know, they mitigate their risk by getting everything, including your blood type,
Yeah,
uh,
I
to,
understand.
to mitigate that risk. It's like it's like applying for a mortgage, right? So
Right, right, right. So yeah, now that you put it that way, I don't frown upon that so much because they don't know who I am, so I understand.
no, no.
Oh yeah, I would say I joke. I joke that you can try this out yourself. Everyone's free to try
Mhm.
this out for themselves. But my favorite words in the English language, and I'm joking. I use this as a joke. I joke a lot on this show. My favorite words in the English language are, "Do you know who I am?" Try that out wherever you are and see what happens.
Do you slam the table at the same time?
The way I always think
Do you,
about it is with our busy restaurant, you want a table and they
Mhm.
tell you there's no tables, and that's the perfect time to break that
Do you know who I
out.
am? That's funny. Have you ever done it?
No, it's just a joke. I just think these things that yeah, I'm kind of silly.
I'd love
But
to give it a try sometime.
but Ming, when did you start investing? Because when I first met you, you were in the middle of a dev project. You bought a potential tear down property. You were going to turn into many units. But that was the first time I met you about 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah, probably about 3 4 years ago,
Yeah,
maybe at REIN.
yeah. Well, no, we were actually having lunch or dinner, I forget, at that Greek restaurant.
Oh, at Zeets.
Zeets, Zets,
Yes,
Zets, Zeets.
Zets. Oh man, I don't know what the name. I've been calling it Zeets for years. I could have been be mispronouncing it,
I
but I
think
know what
it's
you're talking about. It's
ZET.
near, yeah, near the airport.
Yep, yep, yeah. And because you go to networking events,
Mhm.
you don't have a lot of time to talk, but then we actually got into some detail of your project, and it was fascinating stuff. But when did you start investing?
So I started investing a long time ago.
Hmm.
2001 is actually when I bought my first
Oh,
property.
good timing.
Yeah, I'm an old man. I don't know if you can see. It's all gray here now.
Yeah,
Like,
you're Asian, so.
yeah, that means I'm doubly old then, right?
Oh, Eddie Murphy
Uh,
said the most funny thing because there's all these sayings about certain ethnicities that don't age. Eddie Murphy at Saturday Night Live said, "Money don't crack."
money don't crack.
Yeah.
Love that.
And hey, I don't know if that's true, but what Eddie Murphy's implying is people who are rich look younger.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's you, man.
yeah, yeah, right.
First property,
Yeah, so
2001.
2001. Everybody remembers their first, right? So it was a semi 3 bedroom, which was converted to a 5 bedroom. Um,
Wait, did you convert it or it was converted?
no, I bought it converted.
Okay.
It's in Waterloo. It's a student rental property,
Hmm.
and it wasn't set up properly as a student rental property, but there was like a couple of kids who were renting it out. And what happened was, I'd say about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before that, I was just finishing university. Like, I had finished my courses, but I was still living with my roommates. And I just started working at RIM, Research in Motion. Oh, BlackBerry, that's what they're called now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they were watching TV and they were watching Oprah. And Robert Kiyosaki was being interviewed.
Oh.
And he was talking about Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I said, oh, this sounds really interesting. And so I picked up the book. And I'm not much of a reader. I am a lot more now, but back then, you know, it certainly wasn't a reader unless it was a
Yeah,
textbook
you're
that I
young,
had
you
to
know
read.
everything.
Yeah, right.
Go to
But
a
I
good
couldn't put
school,
the
you
book
know even
down.
more.
Yeah, right. But I loved the book. Like, it was my first investment book. First time I'd really been exposed to any of the investor mentality, any of this kind of stuff. And I read it cover to cover within a day or two. And I said, wow, this is mind blowing, right? And I need to buy a rental property. And so shortly after that, I started hunting around for rental property, and I'd saved up maybe 6 or 7 thousand bucks at the time. And I was trying to decide whether I'd buy a house with this, because back then that was enough to buy a house with, 5% down, or do I buy a car? Because at the time I still didn't have a car. I was taking public transit everywhere. Well, my realtor happened to have a car at the time, so she could pick me up, and it was a lot easier actually to buy a house than it was to buy a used car because that's what I was looking at. And so I got into the student rental property probably a couple of weeks after reading that book. And it was all wrong. Like I didn't know anything about investing then, so it was illegal. The maximum number of people I could rent out to was 3 separate individuals, and Waterloo has a bunch of regulations around this. But it was 5 people that I was renting to, so I got in trouble for that. The driveway was extended improperly, and I got fined for that. It was a bunch of problems with the with the place, but I guess you kind of learn, right? Back then I wasn't as resourceful either. Maybe it was I thought I knew everything, but I don't think I even understood like close to, how to become educated on things like I do today.
Well, hang on, Ming. Didn't you used a realtor? They didn't identify these problems for you?
No, I didn't even know. I didn't even know
without permits.
Yeah, I didn't back then. I didn't know I didn't know that a investment focused realtor even existed. I didn't know that was a job class.
Probably didn't exist back then.
Yeah, it might not have existed back in 2001, but
yeah.
I'm sure there were probably guys from REIN or other investors who were doing investment type properties in Waterloo who had some knowledge about it.
Well, hang on. Ming, to be fair, let's not let people off the hook here. You and I both have a real estate license, so let's not let folks off the hook here. We should all know the legal number of occupants are allowed in a residential property.
Yep. Yeah. And I didn't. Not back then.
Oh, but the person who is guiding you through the process should have.
Yeah, should have.
Like the driveway. I didn't see the driveway, so it's hard to tell. But that's something should have at least been flagged. If it was noticeable, like was this done with a permit or not?
It was very, it was a conversion because they had basically taken what was the family room and cut it in half. There was this random wall sitting in the middle of the family room to make another room, and the basement was converted. And yeah, it was
common. But were you made aware of the risks?
Not really, and I don't know if I would have. In her defense, I don't know if I would have listened to them either. I was 21 at the time, right? What the hell do I know?
That's their job to listen to make you aware of the risks. Wouldn't you? True. If you're working with a new client?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be pretty. Well, probably wouldn't even have shown them the house to be honest. But you're going even harder on the slander. All right, go ahead. Anyway, I picked up the house. I think it was like 115,000. It's crazy when I talk about it now. I really sound like an old man when I say I bought a house for 115,000
in Waterloo.
In Waterloo.
And what's it worth today?
Today, I have no idea. I know what I sold it for because I got rid of it a couple of years later.
What'd you sell?
I sold it for about 160, maybe 2 or 3 years later. And that was my first time I got a check that was like in the 5-digit check, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing.
If you were to guess, what is it worth today? Just guess.
Oh, it's probably in the 400s.
Yeah, I was going to guess it was over 4.
Yeah, that'd be my.
That realtor was the best realtor ever.
Nobody really wants to get rid of their properties. I think everybody, if they get rid of properties, it's kind of because they have to. And back then, I didn't understand. I was really uneducated as an investor back then. I was very much just cash flow focused. So if the numbers worked out, the property cash flow, that's what I went in on. And obviously now I know a lot more than that. But back then it made, I think we were renting out the property for $2,000 a month. And, a mortgage on $100,000 is practically nothing. So it was cash flowing very well until I had to kick out students and relocate them and stuff like that. But it's still cash flowing afterwards. But I didn't understand the concept, and what every investor uses today to grow their portfolio of refinancing to pull equity out of it and then continue buying your properties. I thought the only way to get money out was to sell. And, I didn't have guidance, and I didn't have a network to tell me otherwise back then. I was doing everything by myself. So anyway, that's one of the reasons that I sold that property.
Any regrets?
Um, no, I don't think I can really regret anything. There's one project which we'll talk about, which I think was my biggest mistake. But a lot of things I couldn't avoid there as well. But in general, I don't think there's too many regrets in my investing, other than just to do more earlier. That's probably my biggest regret.
Yeah.
I took my foot off the gas for many years, so I got to about 20 doors, 21 doors in Waterloo at one point, and
Great.
it was great, but I hated it. Like,
Why?
I think
That's money,
something
right?
it is, but something I advise my clients so much these days is like trying to understand what you want out of life. It's a little wishy-washy stuff, but if you're clear on what you're trying to get to, assuming you have all the money, like what would you do with your life?
Mm-hmm.
Your investments should line up with that. And the problem for me is my student rentals, especially in Waterloo where I was focused, they're very high touch.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 4-month term in Waterloo, and students are turning over every 4 months.
Ooh.
So you have to know that about the market. So I'm doing lease ups every 4 months on that property, and you know sometimes kids sublet, but there's many times where I was having to come in and manage the property, and it was becoming like just a management nightmare. And so I really hated it actually.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I didn't have, I didn't know all these things like, stop working on your business, or sorry, in your business. You should be working on your business, things like that. And I was so much working, trying to keep the business running. At the same time, I still had a full-time job. And I was a man at that time, my late 20s, early 30s, and, trying to enjoy life a little bit. And I was living in Toronto, so I was having to commute every weekend to go to Waterloo and fix something or help clean up or lease or something like that. And then my experience with property management wasn't very great either. I'd found that one, it was getting very expensive with the lease up fees and then the monthly costs. And I don't know if this is indicative of all property management, but what I've found is when property management companies are small, they're good because you get all their attention and you're kind of their sole client, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's almost like they become a victim of their own success.
Mm-hmm.
They get referrals, they get bigger and bigger, and
Mm-hmm.
then before you know it,
They have
you're just
difficulty scaling.
yeah, yeah. And it happened twice. That this kind of process of them growing happened. So I could never successfully outsource the management piece in Waterloo. Plus, you know, your experienced real estate investor, you know that so much of your success is tied to your ability to execute. And that means having an excellent team working for you, not just property management, but, contractors, plumbers, lawyers, like everything you need to run that business.
Mm-hmm.
I never fully developed it in Waterloo. I didn't understand I needed to develop it. And every time I needed a plumber, I'd be like scrambling to find a plumber, right? So, it's what ended up driving me towards investing in Toronto. That and the returns that I was seeing in Toronto. And that's when my portfolio took a big shift from student rental properties in Waterloo to kind of these higher end rentals in Toronto.
Right. I tagged you on Instagram because someone commented on my Instagram saying there's no returns in Toronto.
Yes.
Tagged you on that comment.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Are there any returns in Toronto? What's up? He's right,
so
wasn't
he you know what? If you take investing in Toronto with a simplistic lens, as in buy and you rent, there are no returns in Toronto.
Right.
It definitely takes a little more sophistication to get returns in Toronto. You're always looking at multifamily strategies.
Right.
And it's how are you implementing those multifamily strategies that gets you to returns, or that's how your returns are scaled, right? You're either getting small because you're getting a little bit of densification, or you're making a ton because you've done a lot of extracting the value out of that property. I can like a typical Toronto investment, like the ones that we work with our clients on.
So hang on, these are not typical of most people, because what's typical is typically new construction condo or resale condo apartment.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I do want our listeners to know what your typical is.
Yeah. And, I don't want to knock pre-con.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at
There's
all.
a time and place for it. And I totally understand why some people invest in it, but it is speculative and it's not very cash flow based. So for us, typical.
And also, like, if you have say you have a lot of cash flow already in your portfolio, you want to take a shot at a few condos. That's, and that's what you want to do. Go ahead. No one's telling you it's wrong.
We have a client who does a lot of pre-con with us because he's traveling. His job keeps him, away quite a bit. For him, it's signing a couple of papers, sending us some pictures of his license, and that's it. He can invest, right? Like, so for him, it's better than nothing. Something like the triplexes, which I'll tell you about, are not his game, right? So typical property for us is, anywhere between 1.2 to 1.4. Rents anywhere from 65 to, I'd say, 8,000, 8,500 a month. So you're cash flowing, depending on the property and your debt service, anywhere between like 500 and 1,500. So it's not like a heavy cash flow play. I know if I took that same, 1.3 million and took it out to Waterloo or Hamilton or Kitchener, I'm probably getting a lot more cash flow. But, you know how it is. You invest and you make money in areas you understand, right? Like, you have to be an expert in that area. And, being an expert in Toronto, I mean, I've lived here pretty much my whole life, and now I've invested a lot here. It allows us to say, like, these are the specific streets we want to invest on because we know what's happening in the area. And we know that's going to drive gentrification. Therefore, it's going to drive appreciation of the property. And that's really where your big game is, right? Cash flow is nice, right? Everybody loves cash flow. Right. But to be, very blunt, if I'm making $200 a month cash flow versus I'm making $500, it doesn't make a damn difference in my life. That extra $300 a month, I'm not retiring off that. I'm not even like eating a nicer meal because of that.
Again, everyone, just for the listeners' benefit, everyone's situation is different.
Yeah, everybody's situation is different.
Yeah. But for sure. Ming's a baller, so.
But yeah, the couple $100 a month, it's nice, but it's not life changing for me.
And everyone's goals are different. There's nothing wrong. Exactly. There's nothing wrong with the strategy you do. It works for a lot of people, and a lot of people make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I don't want to knock cash flow or cash flow focused strategies because they work for a lot of people.
And I was actually talking. Someone was asking me the other day, what are the most important metrics to me, right? My top three probably are cash on cash, or yield, whatever people want to call it, return on investment, and then the thing that nobody talks about enough is return on grief.
Return on grief, yes.
Right.
Yeah, you and I both have special terms for that. We call it pain in the ass adjusted ROI.
yeah, exactly. And what works well with investing in Toronto for doing multifamily in Toronto is you typically get less grief.
Yeah, I mean, you have, going back to the cash flow thing, I was, my Waterloo, I still had Waterloo properties at the time, and they were cash flowing double, triple of what I was getting in Toronto. But in Toronto, I was getting better appreciation. And, there's tons of places that get good appreciation. But for me, because I knew the city and I could say, hey, I want to buy on this street because I know that this mall is being torn down and redeveloped and it's going to make a big difference in the neighborhood. I was able to ride the appreciation curve quite a bit. And that made a huge difference, right? If I'm able to get, because I bought in the right locations with the right fundamentals, if I'm able to get another 1 or 2% of appreciation, that makes a massive difference at the end of 5-10 years versus I'm able to get, double my cash flow. It doesn't actually make, when I do the math, doubling my cash flow doesn't make a huge difference in 10 years. But at 2% more appreciation, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars more. And so that's the approach that I ended up changing to, moving away from a cash flow focused investment portfolio to one that was more, I'd say, appreciation focused, but that had cash flow in it. Cash flow is still important. You don't have cash flow, you can't expand your business. No business scales that's losing more and more money as it gets bigger, right?
You're going broke.
Yeah,
without cash
you're
flow.
driving yourself into the ground.
Yes.
But
Very
I
stressful thing to
became
do. Highly recommend nobody do it.
right. But I just became less cash flow focused. It became a part of my investment strategy, but not the be all and end all at the detriment of everything else. And
Right.
that's how I think when I first started investing, that's
Mm-hmm.
where I was. That's
Mm-hmm.
where my
I'd actually argue that I consider my strategy to be not cash flow focused. I need enough
mm-hmm.
cash flow that I feel comfortable, that I can cover bills and have a little bit left to cover when something happens, roof goes, furnace goes, whatever. But I personally am, I have other streams of income. I have an active business. My real estate, I want it to appreciate, right?
Yeah.
Now, it won't appreciate as much as yours because you're in Toronto, I'm in Hamilton, St. Catharines.
Oh, Hamilton's been doing fantastic though.
It's all been doing fantastic, but again, I want you to touch on your tenant profile because your tenant profile is very different than my tenant profile.
Yeah. So when we were designing this business model, I have two business partners now, Matthew Lee and Sam Ho,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny because we actually all started in a similar path and then ended up kind of converging. So I started investing in Waterloo, Matt started investing in Hamilton and Edmonton, and Sam did Sudbury and a couple of other places. So we all started in the smaller towns. And then we also had some investments in Toronto, and we kind of came together because we were going through the same process. And that was basically like we were having challenges with some of our tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Student rentals, they're great. They're definitely going to be more work. Yeah. Not because students are malicious. You've got a ton of student rentals, and students aren't necessarily like out to get you, but they've got bigger things on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
The number of times I have to, because I still have student rentals, remind about, rent is due, is like 10 times what I have to do with my Toronto properties. It's not because they're trying to be late on rent. Mm-hmm. They've got exams, they've got other stuff. It's the last thing on their mind.
Mm-hmm. Right? Take out the trash.
Take out the trash, like whatever it is.
Pick up your room. Clean up after yourself in the toilet, in the washroom.
Yeah. Pull that pizza off the ceiling. Like it's just not their focus. Mm-hmm. And because I was physically far away from my rental properties and still managing them myself, it was just becoming more challenging. So when we started looking at Toronto, we really wanted to focus on what was the quote unquote best tenant. So we kind of worked backwards to get to what would be the best tenant for us. I'm sure you and your listeners have heard millions of times that millennials are the best tenants. That's no different for us in Toronto. We're still after that millennial demographic.
Yeah.
But a Toronto millennial
with a great job. Let's just clarify.
Yeah. So the Toronto millennials with great jobs tend to work in the downtown core. So mm-hmm. They're working, financial district. They're doing consulting. They're working in tech corridors. So and they don't drive. Nobody drives if you're living in downtown Toronto. So it becomes even more important access to transportation infrastructure. At the same time, we didn't want, because of Ontario law, we really didn't want lifers. If we have somebody that comes into our property, that's, let's say, a family, no knocks on families, but, I have a family. I wouldn't want to, once my kids are in school, I wouldn't want to change that. Like, we're going to be there for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And with rent control, you don't want to go anywhere.
That's right. And with rent control, the good and bad of rent control is that it moderates the market, right? When we had a recession, rents pretty much stayed the same. As we're going through a boom, rents are still slowly increasing, but you have very little control as the landlord as to what your rents are. So we want people who are naturally turning over. Mm-hmm. And, when I was in my 20s, I was moving all the time. So it was really important for us as part of our strategy is to get that demographic, mm-hmm. people who are naturally moving all the time. Because I don't want to do rent evictions or any of these kind of stuff that, I want to be a good landlord. Mm-hmm. So it's advantageous for me to rent to people who are going to move anyway. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, part of the good thing of having student rentals as well. They regularly turn themselves over.
Yeah, exactly. You never have to worry about somebody staying there for life. hopefully, right? Hopefully they
Forever
graduate
student.
at some point, right?
I thought that was another. I thought that was part of being a millennial too. So they're forever
Right.
students.
Like my sister with 2 degrees. I think she was there for like 7 or 8 years, but
Oh wow,
yeah,
good for her.
in one of my rental properties too. But anyway, separate story. Um, where was I going with this? So anyway, so we picked that millennial demographic, and then we figured out like, what's the maximum time that they're willing to commute into their
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of landed on between 25 and 35 minutes commute into work.
Mm-hmm.
And once you started getting out of 35 minutes, we started losing that demographic. They were willing to live in less nice and or smaller places closer
Right.
to the core to stay under that 35-minute commute mark.
So where would you draw the set? Where would you draw? Where would that distance start from? Would that be like Young and Bloor or like Young and King?
Yeah, we started from like downtown, so pretty much Union Station.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, got it.
And so it's going to be about 35 minutes from that downtown core,
right.
Because most of the jobs that are millennial focused are within a 10-15 minute walk from Union
Station. Right. So that would be streetcar, subway.
Yeah, so we're
Uber.
So as we start to map it out, we started looking west along the Bloor subway line, east along the Danforth subway line. It gets us into like places like the Annex, if you're looking at kind of the richer students, into Dovercourt, Wallace Emerson, which is the neighborhood west of that, and then a couple subway stops west of that as well. Little Italy, Little Portugal, Corso Italia. For those of you who are in Toronto, these are a bunch of the West End neighborhoods. And those ones make sense for the millennial demographic. A lot of people ask me like, oh, don't these people want to live in condos? The answer is yes. A lot of them do. I would say maybe about 70% of these people, their ideal place to live is a condo. But there's 30% of those people who aren't interested in living in condos, who are looking for a little more home-like place to live with a backyard. If they have pets or something like that is also one of the reasons that they want to stay out of a condo. But they still want condo level finishes. So when we do the renovations on these triplexes, we're still bringing them up to be condo competitors. So we do stuff like glass railings, quartz countertops, nice finishes. So that way we're comparable with condos.
Right.
But we're focused more on that 30% that's not interested in living in a glass tower in the sky.
Can you give some figures on a more recent deal, so that anyone who's interested in pursuing this, what's like the entry point? How much are they spending in renovations? How long in renovations?
Yeah, so it really depends. What we've been doing in the last 2 years are completely legal triplex conversions. So if you're familiar with the Toronto market, I'd say 95% of multifamily, single family turned into multifamily homes are quote unquote illegal. And what I mean by illegal is a terrible name because it really actually doesn't tell you anything.
They're not gonna put you in jail. They fine.
Yeah, well, it breaks down to two things too. Like legality is really making sure that you're conforming to zone and making sure that you're conforming to building code, right, to fire code. If you got those two, you are quote unquote legal, right? City of Toronto cares, and I think rightfully so, a lot about the building code, about that fire code. At the end of the day, they want places to be safe. So, I'm not recommending people do illegal renovations, but if they go and do a non-zone conforming renovation of their property, make sure you're at least meeting fire code, fire regulations, so proper fire separation.
You're negligent if you don't.
Yeah, I think so too, right? Like I couldn't live with myself if I had a dangerous property, right? Like hopefully these landlords out here have hearts, but you should.
When the fire department disagrees on your code, the level of renovation you've done, you're in trouble.
Right. Proper fire separation, interconnected fire alarms. We have separate HVAC units between units, things like that. Like whatever it takes to make sure that you're.
Sorry, is that required?
Sure. It is if you're doing fully legal. If you're not doing fully legal, you don't necessarily need the HVAC separation.
Got it.
So there's a couple of things. There's like legal basement suites, there's duplexes and triplexes, and they all have different definitions and different requirements for you to meet. So what we've been doing a lot of recently is fully legalized triplex. So that means meeting both the fire as well as meeting the zoning.
I wanted to ask you, is it different for, you mentioned you need separate HVAC.
Yes.
Sorry, layman's terms, heating, air conditioning.
Yep.
Is that required for, what about duplexes? Are you required to have separate?
So no. But duplex can be several things. So there's like a legal duplex, which you have to fall under actually rules that are more similar to a triplex. And then there's secondary suite. Secondary suite has a lot. The rules and requirements are less stringent under secondary suite. So most people are actually doing secondary suites. They're not doing actual legal duplexes. And I would recommend not doing a legal duplex because of all the work that's required. You need some sort of monitoring of your HVAC. You know, I'm not an architect, but from what I understand with duplexes, you might not need complete separation, but you might need a zoned unit. So the upstairs is one zone, the downstairs is one zone, and then you would have some sort of fire detection within the main air return or the ducting. Sorry.
In our areas, we have a device that detects for smoke. Yeah. So if it detects smoke, it'll turn off the fan in the furnace.
Yes.
So it'll turn off the furnace essentially, and it's a quick story. We clients of ours, they've had tenants trigger it with cigarette smoke. And all of our units are non-smoking, and then here they go and do this, and so this is how we this is sort of how you enforce no smoking. Kind of passive aggressively enforce non-smoking.
Right. These triplexes end up being so on the fully legal side, there's a bunch of there's fire separation, which I think a lot of people know about. Separate ventilation and HVAC for each unit is what we do. I don't know if there's other ways of doing this, but the best way that we found, and I guess the most cost-effective way, is to have 3 separate forced air units per unit. So three air conditioners, 3 furnaces, 3 HRVs in each of the units. Everything's completely separated. Everybody has their own control. That's what gets expensive. Like when you're talking about a fully legalized place, our renovation costs, I would say, start at $450. So we're buying these places for about like 1.2. We're putting about $450 of renos into it, but we're getting pretty high rents out of this. And some of our clients are turning them and flipping around, and we're doing these ourselves as well. Toronto's turned into this crazy market, right? Where to get into a family home in downtown, you're looking at 1.5, sometimes up to 2. So the average person, that's not even in consideration. What a lot of people are doing now is they're buying these homes, they're living in the top unit, the nicest unit, which oftentimes is 2 floors, and then they're renting out the other 2, and now they've got a very small mortgage to deal with, right? And it helps them also for mortgage qualification because it's fully legal. If a place is not fully legal, then the bank's not going to count those rents, right? So they only may be able to take 1 unit's rents. So we recently did.
Sorry, I mean, you should make a good point, because I want listeners to. I don't know if investors always appreciate that, who the competition is.
Yes.
Sorry, listener. We got cut off. I ran out of space on the drive I was using to record this, so apologies to Ming. The recording stopped, so we're recording again 2 days later, and we were talking about triplexes. How much do you remember about where we were?
Very little, but I think if we were talking about triplexes, we were probably talking about how do you actually cash flow in the city, which is so many times people come to me and they're like, oh, I don't invest in Toronto because there's no way you can invest in Toronto. And the reality is, it's not that it's impossible to invest. It's just a very different strategy, right?
Different strategy. I think they're just not aware of.
Yeah.
They're probably just newer, I guess, because you know, I've known you for a bit, and I know you're doing it, so it's possible.
Yeah, and I get it. It's not for everybody too. I mean, you know, a quote unquote typical property we're looking at is, you know, anywhere between 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and for a lot of people, that's not like getting into a property at that price range is not a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And then you often have to renovate, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you need a ton of capital to execute on these properties.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 20% down plus, you know, a good 100 to 200,000 in renovation to get it going.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get decent returns out of these properties.
Right. And the thing about triplexes that I like is, well, first step to real estate investing, in my opinion, is owning the land.
Yeah.
Because that is what's mostly scarce.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, you know, we're trying to get our clients into land ownership. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them start in condos because condos are what they're easy and they're accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the lower price point. But the value is not in fractional land ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's a place like Toronto too. Competition pops up quite readily and easily.
Mm-hmm.
You have a condo, and then, you know, a couple of years later, 2 or 3 have opened up on the same street that you're on,
Mm-hmm.
and
Even
the
worse, they block your
rarity.
view.
They block your view, right?
That's really bad.
Yeah, which is not an if, it's a when, right? Like in a city growing at this rate, the view you have now, unless you're right on the lake, is going to be blocked at some point. So if you have real land, I mean, that's where the value is. It's not like the real estate itself, the physical property, is getting worth more, right? Like that gets depreciated over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's that land. So we're always trying to get people into land ownership.
Right, land ownership. Also, what I like about your triplex strategy is you can actually get cash flow. Versus, I don't know how you would ever get the same cash flow in a condo with the same loan to value.
Yeah, you're definitely not. I mean, long gone are the days where you're buying a condo at 20% and cash flowing. That's long gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then 25%. Now 30, I think you're maybe break even now. And you know,
that's
at
not
30%, it's not bad, but at 30% down, like the one thing I always say is, you know, our number one job as real estate investors is to put our money to its highest and best use.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can buy a property, put a ton down in cash flow, but it's not a very sophisticated strategy, and it's not really good use of your money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being an investor is trying to figure out how to maximize your return and mitigate risk in
right.
The same vein, right? So.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think we can both agree that like a new construction condo is the right investment for somebody, just not the value investor.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like there's definitely a market, and you know, if you don't have other options, and that's something that you can get into, your current situation maybe doesn't allow you for a higher expense. I just saw your son running through the back there. This is the realities of working at home, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like if you're a new investor, getting into an investment that you're going to make some money is better than not investing at all. And there's a group of people who spend, you know, analysis by paralysis. They spend so much time trying to figure out the best place, the best possible investments. Yeah, when really you're better off getting into an investment, making your returns over a couple of years, and then modifying your strategy as you go along, because you're not going to know everything off the bat. Like I didn't know that I would end up disliking student rentals. And you know, if you never got into student rentals, you may never known you enjoyed student rentals, right? So you have to do it, right? You're not going to get that experience unless you just dive in.
Right. And if nothing else, it provided you seed money for anything else you want to do.
Oh yeah, like, you know, everybody says best time to invest was yesterday. Second best time is now. And you'd have no seed money to do other things.
So you work in Toronto. You work with people who buy new construction condos. Aren't some parents buying these as a hedge for their kids for future use, or even for their own retirement use?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely part of the market there, which is people who are buying these as, you know, instead of investing in an RESP, they're picking up, you know, a condo or pre-con, renting it out, And then, by the time they've got, supplement some money every month, but they see it like, equivalent to contributing to an RESP, for example.
Right.
So, but
well,
hey, here.
I'm not giving advice. It's just something I would do as a hedge. Because if prices keep going at any semblance the way they're going, and your kid's going to need a place to live in 20 years, right? So even as a hedge, it's not a bad idea.
I mean, I'm sure you must have had this discussion with Cherry at some point, but I've talked about this with my wife a lot. And it's, if our kid or your kids have quote unquote normal middle-class lives, I don't know how they'll be homeowners, right? The rate that the cost of home ownership is going up is far exceeding what's happening on the side of salaries, right? So yeah, I don't know how that will be a reality for them. So if you want real estate to be a part of your legacy, you've kind of got to get in soon.
Right.
So you have something to pass down to your kids and that they can leverage for their kids.
What was the price of the last condo you sold?
Probably not a good indicator, but the last condo we sold probably was in the 900s.
Okay, how about something under 600?
There is stuff under 600. There's not very much under 600 these days.
What's the median? What's the median condo these days? This is scary.
I don't know what the median price is across Toronto, because even for the condos, we're very set on certain areas to condo invest.
Okay.
So we don't buy, no knock on my friends out in Scarborough, but we don't buy condos out in Scarborough. We don't buy condos up in North York. They get this, again, far away from that demographic that we're looking for. So we're very concentrated on right in the downtown core, so right around the financial district. And our strategy there is a little different for people who are getting to those. We're actually doing executive rentals for those properties. Not Airbnb, but actually going through an executive rental firm to get higher cash flow on those.
I didn't know. It's like, I need to hear more about this.
well, we're trying to. I'm sure you deal with this as well, but people come to you kind of at different points in their investing career, right? There are some people who are, have 700,000, some people millions to invest. But for somebody who's at a slightly lower price point, who is interested in investing in Toronto, this is an option for them, right?
Okay.
They're
so
very
tell me about the investment. Tell me about the investment in financial district.
Yeah, so there's very specific condos. So these are the condos that one allow for this kind of rental. We're talking walking.
Some don't. Some don't allow for executive rental.
Some don't. No.
Oh, really?
You can have it. You can have it in your. I mean, the condo bylaws can be whatever that the condo board decides, right?
Right.
And some condo boards, they want short term, they don't want executive rentals. Basically, they just want people who are living there.
Interesting.
So there's only about let's say 8 maybe or so condos that work for executive rentals.
Right. So you really need to know your stuff.
I mean, we work with a firm that does a lot of this stuff, and kind of have to know. But these particular condos, they're all walking distance to financial district, because remember, it's an executive or executive and maybe his partner or his family that are coming into the city.
Yeah.
They don't know the neighborhoods. They don't know if they want to be living in a hipster neighborhood. All they know is they want to be close to work.
Yeah.
So anything more than kind of a 5-10 minute walk from the downtown core is everything has to be 5-10 minutes. So you're pretty limited. There's not a ton of condos that work.
Can you give the streets that you would say border?
You're not going anywhere south of the Gardner.
The lake?
You're not. Okay. Yeah. Well, you're not even kind of crossing underneath, because there's a couple of condos now that are tied to the path, and you're staying north of there. There's maybe one condo that might work. I think it's One York that can work for executive rental, but they tend to be.
My dad bought there. Cool.
Yeah, nice building. But they tend to be north of Gardner, and I would say you're not looking any more north than Dundas. Dundas is kind of your north border. East, you're not going any further than Jarvis, and west, you're not going any further than Spadina, right? So it's a pretty tight area. Yeah, downtown, and the closer the better. The executive rentals are looking for cookie cutters. Well, they're looking for um, a certain level of furnishings. So if any of our clients get into this, we pass them this list of furnishings, what to buy, where to buy it. This is the price you're paying, and furnish it to these exact specifications. Because the companies that use the executive rental firms, they're not checking out unit by unit. They expect every place to have a bed of a certain quality. They expect every place to have couches of a certain quality. We just have to make sure that we're meeting those expectations.
And then, so what? So if an investor, say I walked up to you, saying I can afford one of these, what's the price at to pay one of these places? And then
most
I
of
pay
these
for furniture. The investor has
you'd be paying for furniture. You're looking. I mean, the properties themselves are anywhere between about $750 to $850, I'd say, and you're probably looking at about a 40 to 60% lift over standard rents. Occupancy is about 80 to 85%, and rental times, you may be looking at one month, I think, is the minimum, and you're looking up to like 6 to 8 months at the higher end. But your typical executive rental, the person's staying in there for about 3 to 4 months.
And then what do you owe to the property management company for doing all this wonderful work?
I actually don't remember the split off the top of my head, but they do take a much larger split than your typical property management at 10%. Don't quote me on this. It's somewhere like 25 to 30%.
Yeah, my guess was 20. So I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah.
Super cool. You mentioned the price. How many square foot? What's like the sweet spot for square footage for an executive rental?
You're generally looking at 2-bedroom properties. So in Toronto, that's anywhere between like 750 to 950, maybe 1,000 square feet at the high end. But you're not looking for 1 bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be a little too small for the target market, even though it's 1 person, maybe 2 people. They've got enough coin that they're willing to at least get a 2-bedroom property. So that's kind of the rough square footage you'd be looking at.
This is fascinating. What kind of down payment do you think you need to have to make this cash flow, or can you cash flow 20% down?
So when we're doing the numbers on this, you're pretty much break even at this point.
Even with a 20% down payment, you're break even.
20% down, because you've got increased costs of management, you've got increased costs of furniture, supplying the place, all these kind of things.
Yeah.
So you're just break even at this.
I know, but Ming, this is a great address.
It is a great address.
One York, I don't know the city that well. But for example, this is why I always recommend, like, even when people ask me for Toronto, like, I don't do it myself. I refer it out because I believe in expertise. But like One York, for example, I don't think anyone's going to block their view of the lake.
Yeah, One York's nice, and it's a great development. Like, there's lots of nice stuff in the first couple of levels there. So little community.
That sounds awesome. You can like 20% down, and you can be hands off and break even.
Yeah, and it's definitely an option for people. Like, I mean, we use that as a strategy. It's a bit of a stepping stone for people. It can be a complete strategy, but as I mentioned earlier, we try to get people to land eventually.
Right.
Because that's really where you see the much better returns.
Oh, I'm with you, but like when I was talking about a hedge, right?
Yeah,
this is a great hedge.
Yeah, it's a good hedge.
As if for someone like myself, if I ever wanted to live in the city, I could hire you, do the strategy, and I could break even with it and be hands off.
Yeah, and you're not tied to some of the challenges that are happening around Airbnb right now.
Yeah.
you know, the reality is, I don't think we're going to see enforcement for a little bit on Airbnb. The city is, it's going to take them a while to be able to go through with their Airbnb plans.
But this does not count. This does not fall under short-term rental.
No, it doesn't. And actually, tenant issues don't fall under the LTB either, because it's a contract basis, so it's a little different. I don't know the details of this, but that's handled by the property management company. But
this is awesome. I'm more excited about this than triplexes right now.
Maybe I have to send you some spreadsheets on triplex return to get you excited about that.
No, I know. I've talked to Sam. I've talked to Sam about his triplex returns. No, the triplex stuff is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I remember. So I want to move on from condos because I want the triplex stuff is fascinating. I think you mentioned that 2 days ago, the renovation budget starts at $450.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a ton of money. I think it scares people when they first hear it. But the reason, and if you know construction, you're probably like, why is it so damn expensive? But to do a properly legalized triplex, there's a lot of physical things that are required that are different from a non-standard project.
Right.
So you're looking at things like, I think I mentioned 3 HVACs. That's not cheap, right? To go through and do 3 HVACs. Things
for the layman, you have 3 separate furnaces and air conditioners and related
That's
ducting.
Right. Yeah,
and it's all ducted. None of it's ductless. Is any of it ductless?
No, it's all ducted, and that's actually there's some updates to zoning recently. Sorry, not zoning, building code, which they're looking for air recirculation. We used to actually use a ductless. Yes, we used to use a ductless solution using. Oh my god, what? Hot water
system?
No.
A heat pump.
Why is it heat pumps? Yeah, thanks. But that kind of solution, and then ductless AC. It's roughly the same price. It's probably a little cheaper, but the advantage is the footprint is a lot less. And when you're talking about these properties, like every square foot in Toronto counts. So if you can shrink your HVAC footprint, that's great. But now, because of the updates to building code, looking for HRVs and air recirculation, it's easier now just to do traditional forced air.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work it out in my head if HRV is necessary in a heat pump heated house, but okay.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the HVAC portion. This is where we have architects on our team and stuff like that to manage those. But we did make the change this year to go from a heat pump to forced air because of the updates to building code.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
How nice would it be? How nice would it be just to have heated floors throughout the unit?
It would be great, and I think that was definitely a nice sale feature. When you're going through the property and getting it rented, because you have warm floors everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see the purpose of an HRV when it's radiant heat from the floor. But okay, that's fine. Governments do what governments do.
Yeah. Obviously you've got that. You've got separate metering on both the gas side as well as the electrical side. So there's a lot of additional costs when you're looking at doing a full legal triplex conversion, as well as there's the overhead costs, because we're sitting in front of committee of adjustments, and we have representation through our firm there. There's cost to that process as well. So the legalization process is definitely considerably more expensive, but we know that you see those returns at the end. So I don't remember if we talked about it in the first half, but we recently closed a project in Brockton Village. We picked it up for 1.25. We put about 450 in renovations on that property. And then we sold it. Actually, the plan was to rent it out. And we put out some ads. We could have rented out for about $9,500 a month. But we decided to put it on the market, see if we test the market and see how that went. And we ended up selling the property for 2. So it was a pretty good lift on the property itself.
Sorry, what was the buy? Can you walk us through the deal? What was the buy price?
Sure, it's 125.
Buy for 125, 1.25, so 1.25 million, folks.
Yep.
And rental costs roughly?
Rental cost was roughly 450.
That's not bad, including soft costs, like you mentioned.
Including soft costs,
like legalization costs, committee of adjustments.
That's correct. And then we exited at 2.
Damn.
And that was over about I'd say a 10-month period from acquisition to sale.
Wow. Are there a lot of buyers for this?
Yes. We had 16 offers on the property.
Hang on. What was your asking?
I don't remember. I think we asked like 1.7, maybe 1.8. Asking price, as you know, is nothing more than marketing strategy. Realistically, we thought the property was worth maybe 1.9. So two was a pleasant surprise. But what I think was more surprising, and I think I touched on this in the first half, was the demographic of people that were buying. It wasn't investors. Mm-hmm. It was end users who needed a legalized 2 units so that way they could wqualify for a mortgage.
Who do not want to go through this process of doing this themselves?
It's out of the realm of expertise for a lot of people to do actually legalized. Like, mm-hmm. I know we can do it, and I know your buddy Andre, he's mm-hmm. the other guy that has the ability to do it fully mm-hmm. legalized. But mm-hmm. I think we're the only 2 that do it in Toronto. So the end users, they need that legal triplex, so that way those rents that they're getting count towards their mortgage qualification. Yeah. If it's just an illegal triplex, the bank won't count those rents, and they can't qualify for a house. So, right. So I think that's part of why there was so much activity on this property.
Just kind of sort of to summarize the build, because this property was done legally as 3 units, the bank was willing to count all the rents towards the financing costs.
Correct.
Otherwise the buyer wouldn't be able to get the same amount of dollars for same amount of enough money in the mortgage to be able to afford this house. It's $2 million. I just think you have to make to get a $2 million mortgage. You have to have like a $500,000 income and a sizable down payment.
People are still pretty well heeled who are buying these homes. There's no for sure.
Well, there's 16 offers. How many of them are over asking? They're all over asking, I'm guessing.
Yeah, all over asking. Yeah.
So even if they paid asking, that's still a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah. But I think obviously we've done the place nicely. It's properly staged. The design of the house is modern and kind of with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That's a big part too. But I think it was eye-opening to us, that demographic. We I think had initially thought it was primarily going to be investors that were interested mm-hmm. when we exited from these kind of properties, mm-hmm. and to see that investors still were part of the pool, but the people that were really bidding the big money were end users, not investors. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because investors are looking at it like you or I would. There's going to be a maximum number that makes sense, and after that, they're not going to see their returns. They're not going to cash flow. But for an end user, mm-hmm. Whether their mortgage is being subsidized, whether their mortgage payment is going to be $3,000 a month or $3,500 a month, mm-hmm. it doesn't make as much of a difference to them if they can get that house versus they can't get any house because they have no subsidization on their mortgage, mm-hmm. right? or ability to qualify.
I don't know if you'd be able to figure this out, but were any of the offers foreign investors who just wanted to park money?
I don't know for that particular property, but I can tell you in general, the talk around foreign investments in Toronto is way overhyped. Okay. It's a very political thing, right? It's nice to say, oh my God, people are coming to Canada, bringing all this money and raising our cost of living here. But, mm-hmm. I've participated in a lot of bidding wars. Most of the time, it's local people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot mm-hmm. of people in Toronto, in Ontario, that are they've got tons of money. There's a lot of rich people, and you know, when they're buying properties that are, you know, $1.5 million, you know, if it's an end home, they're not putting 20% down, right? They're not trying to maximize their return like we are as investors. They're putting like 50-60% down on these properties. They already have a property, so they've made some money off that, and they're just moving into another property now. So, you know, the majority of mortgages are still under $1 million. People are just putting big down payments these days.
I think the majority of Canadians are risk adverse. They believe in having limited debt.
Yeah.
Versus we like try to maximize our debt.
Yeah, I'm like smiling as you say that, because it's like, oh, if people saw my financial, it's nice not to work full time anymore, but really now I'm working for the banks, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. More like my tenants are working for the banks, right? In an indirect way.
That's a better frame.
The property that we're trying to buy right now is it's office, so it's for us, and we can 100% finance it, including the renovation. So it's a big mortgage, and so it's over 100% LTV. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah, if you go through it over 100%, I'll have to start calling you an American.
Yeah, another time you want to talk about this. It is such a pleasure to be Canadian, because the business development bank will do this for the right customer. So this is government money.
Dang, we got to catch up on this sometime. Like you said,
because you guys
conversation
are
for another time.
Soon. Like you and Matthew and Sam. Because can you actually, now we're talking about Matthew. Since I'm talking about Matthew and Sam and yourself, tell us about Volition Real Estate.
Volition Properties. Yep.
And then you guys do meetups as well. Is there a name for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, if people are interested in Toronto investing and what we do, the name of our company is Volition Properties. There's basically 4 things about the business. First thing is advisory, and that's basically coaching and running the meetups and seminars and educating people on real estate investing. The second thing is the sales, so helping people buy properties. Third thing is the construction and renovation and design. So when you buy these properties, you're almost always having to do some sort of renovation. So we do that. And the last thing is the property management of these properties. And that's really to make sure that our clients are still able to buy and not be hung up in managing the business themselves. We've got, I think I chatted with you about this, but we've got an event coming up February 1st. Basically running through everything we know, trying to cram our years of knowledge into one day. So it's going to be pretty intense. I was looking at the itinerary with Matthew yesterday. I'm like, shit, like there's so much to get. Oh, I shouldn't be swearing. I'm going to get muted. But we're trying to cram everything we can into one day and get at least, give people who have not much experience in real estate investing come out of that day with, okay, I've got a basic understanding and maybe a knowledge of where I need to drill in more to get a get a good understanding of how to invest in real estate.
So who's this for? Who is this conference for? Is it called, you're calling it a conference? Is there a name for it?
We're calling it Quick Start.
Quick Start. Okay.
Yeah. So it's really for people who are newer to investing. We find in the beginning of the year, and I don't know if you get this as well, in the beginning of the year is when we get a lot of people who have, new year, they've committed to getting a hold of their finances. And so we wanted to make sure that we were kind of addressing that, because every year that's kind of the people that reach out to us in the beginning of the year. So we're like, okay, let's actually put a full event together this time and talk about what you need to get involved in investing in real estate. So I'd say it's definitely more, beginner focused, but it's not a beginner level course. I think it'd actually be pretty intense. So, if you're kind of that newer to real estate investing, or maybe have 1 or 2 properties, this is right. Kind of the market that we're looking at.
Will you be teaching the stuff like we taught today? Like, that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so we'll be going quite in depth into the triplex model, and understanding the role of cash flow and how do you analyze a property properly.
Yeah.
Like how does real estate return?
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the areas of risk that are involved in real estate, and how do you mitigate that risk? We have speakers from Vine Group, for example, coming in to talk about financing. We've got Dan Tesla from Hub coming in to talk about, you know, how do you insure multifamily properties? So it is hopefully soup to nuts, everything you need to know to get started in real estate investing.
Because I've been to your meetings before, and I like how you guys bring it. You start with the fundamentals, like you talked immigration, you talked about you go from the macro to the micro to the neighborhood to the tenant profile.
Yeah. I mean, if you know, you and I we're of this school. You know, we're originally REIN members, and you know, that's Don Campbell had always talked about the macro and then drilling down from there, and it makes complete sense. And you know, what we're talking about isn't revolutionary. It's just how do you apply it to your local market, and you know, that's really where it gets different, because you know, every area you're going to apply those concepts differently. The fundamentals of what drives a real estate market stay the same everywhere. But you know, if you found those fundamentals, now how do you execute on a strategy that takes advantage of, you know, the growing population or the increasing infrastructure or whatever it happens to be?
So where is the conference, and when is quick start?
It is February 1st at Ryerson University in the engineering building. Check out our website, www.volitionprop.com, and all the details are right up there.
Fabulous. No, this is super cool. It's so specific. I love it.
I'm excited.
And you'll cover everything? This is awesome. A bunch, and since you're talking about executive rentals and triplexes, I know how you guys do triplexes. It's all like real estate porn.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's 8 hours, so we'll try to get into the essentials, like the most important stuff. Yeah, that's the plan.
I missed the question I wanted to ask earlier. Like the triplex example that you gave, how many of those would you do a year? Because the one thing about like I work with investors just like you do as well. Oftentimes they'll just come up to me and like, okay, I'm ready to buy XYZ. Here's my favorite. I want to buy a triplex fourplex, right? In my market, those are legal non-conforming, and everyone's chasing them. So we might do 2 of that style of deal a year. So you're gonna have to be patient, right? Yeah. That's my example.
Yep. So for us, because you know we have the same problem, there is more money out there looking for a place than there are deals for that money, right? That is no different in Toronto. We are creating a lot more of these places, and that's why we have that construction part of our company. It was never something that we're like, oh, can't wait to be a construction project manager. That was never in the scope of things.
Multiple streams of income. There's so much money doing renos.
And so much, and it's no heartache at all, right?
Like, not at all. Everything's predictable.
Right.
It's know exactly what's behind the walls.
Yeah, exactly. But it was more out of like, you can't buy these places really in Toronto. Most of the time you're buying a place that fits the ability to do the construction. Right. And even then, you know, we probably do about 2 to 3 a month on this kind of property where we're buying it and we're doing conversion. That's kind of what we average.
So one more time, February 1st, quick start, Ryerson building, engineering building specifically.
Yep.
Volitionprop.com.
Yeah. Buy our tickets ahead of time because we won't be selling tickets at the door. But yeah, you can buy them off our website.
Yeah. Yo, I had that same question from folks like, can I just buy tickets at the door? And I said, just buy them on your phone while you're in line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, we're running an early bird too for the next week or two. I don't know
What's
when
the
this
deadline?
gets published.
It'll be soon from today, but when whoever listens to this, it'll be a different day.
I'm terrible. I don't remember when the deadline is, but I know it's about a week or two before the event.
So
The code
don't wait.
is, yeah, it's it takes $51 off the price, so it brings it down to $99.
Oh my god!
And it is early 51 is the code.
Okay, and I'll have all the details on our website. Hopefully, Ming will send it all to me so we can pass it on to you all. Truthaboutrealestate.investing.ca.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Will make sure you get all that detail.
Thank you, Ming. And anything you want to share? Any final words?
I wanted to thank you for putting the Wealth Hacker conference together. We have a whole contingent of us from our Toronto investors. Probably like 15 of us came, and everybody had good things to say. And I had a fantastic time there. So
I'm glad.
Thanks for all the effort to put that together, because it's not easy doing one of these events.
Yeah, you guys are crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw the Wealth Hacker conference. We're like, oh yeah, we can do this. We got this. But yeah, it was good. We had a really good time. Grant Cardone's pretty awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, you got Dan Tesla, so
I'll tell him you better 10x our expectations now. We got Dan.
Excellent. All right. Thank you again, man.
Okay, man. Okay, take care.